Okay. We're going to pick up where we left off yesterday. We did the first half of potential sources, and this is where we're at in our sourcing cycle, working on potential sources. And they were just looking at these degrees of competition. You'll see questions on these: full and open, limited, technical, single and sole source, and multiple source. Not too exciting. And then you have monopoly, and most people know monopolistic competition's a little different. This is where there's many sellers and buyers, but they try to brand their products so they don't compete head to head. Breakfast cereal, shoes, clothing, that type of thing. Soft drinks. And then oligopolies, which are few suppliers, and price is controlled by an industry leader. So this is the oil cartel out of Saudi Arabia. Then you've got perfect competition, which doesn't really exist, but it's the key here is it's a homogeneous product. So a bushel of wheat grade A is a bushel of wheat grade A from any supplier. And then another weird one, monopsony. So that's several sellers and one buyer. This is the government buying military jets and things like that. So remember, the Sony refers to sellers, and the opoly refers to buyers. So mono means it's the other way around. Mono means one buyer, Sony is buyers, and opoly, poly is one seller. So that's kind of how you try to remember that. Then you got nature of sources, manufacturers, distributors, large and small companies, national and local, international and domestic, internal and external sources, emergency sources, existing versus new sources. Which brings us to types of procurement structures, our first slide for today. So, and they've got this in here, and you'll see questions on it too. It's kind of an ISM unique thing. How the procurement department is structured depends on mission and structure. So you basically have centralized and decentralized purchasing. So centralized department is given authority for most supply management decisions. You consolidate the pros, or you consolidate volumes, you can standardize across operating units, reduce administrative expenses. Purchasing can then develop specialization and expertise on specific commodities, but it can be slow. It can slow the acquisition process and increase lead times, which if you look at PACCAR, this is what we're kind of a hybrid centralization. And we can be kind of slow about adding new suppliers. And we have specialized commodity managers. Each of you has got a desk that has certain commodities on it. Then the opposite is decentralized purchasing, used when increased coordination and closer working relationships between purchasing and the end user are required. So when I worked at Expedia, they used decentralized purchasing. You had a purchasing manager, and everybody reported to that manager, but he just farmed out his commodity managers, or category managers, I guess they call them, to the marketing department, to HR, to whoever needed some purchasing expertise. And you really were working for the marketing chief, but the purchasing manager wrote your report. So hybrid usually leans more heavily towards either centralized or decentralized. And there's center-led, which is a hybrid structure. So the strategic direction is centralized and executions of plans is decentralized. This is closer to what PACCAR does. Other purchasing methods, you've got commodity councils, cross-functional multi-divisional teams. So you would have engineering, purchasing, materials on your commodity council, and they would have to work together to select suppliers and negotiate contracts and monitor performance. I mean, this just sounds slow. I haven't seen anybody that actually does this, but it's an interesting approach. And you can consolidate purchase volumes as in centralized purchasing. You got pool buying, which is a cooperative type of thing, and we'll get to cooperative in a minute. It's the consolidation of requirements from multiple organizations into a single order. So administration costs are shared by the participants. So us and Daimler would get together and go talk to Cummins, and we would pool our demand for Cummins engines. Now, the problem with this is we probably couldn't do that because it would end up being an antitrust lawsuit, and we would probably lose. But there are industries that they allow it. School boards, so they can buy books and supplies. They can usually work as a cooperative. Hospitals can also usually work as a cooperative. And then you've got lead division buying. So if we didn't have centralized purchasing here in Bellevue and Louisville, I guess, and Peterbilt had its commodity managers and Kenworth had its commodity managers, we would do like we do in engineering. Kenworth commodity manager may have the lead for cooling modules. Peterbilt commodity manager may have the lead for axles. Cooperative purchasing. So again, this is when companies are combining their purchasing power on selected items to gain leverage. You may form or use a centralized buying service or a cooperative informally, and a lot of the school boards will do this. They use a separate company as the cooperative to actually place the orders. And then consortium. 2 or more organizations join through a third party to leverage volumes and buy materials. Form of collaboration used in both private and public. Maybe formal or informal organizations, but usually on a consortium, you're going to form a joint venture with 2 or 3 firms, which is what we're doing for batteries. Us, Cummins, and one other battery firm are forming a joint venture. You could call that a consortium because we're combining our demand. Issues in global sourcing. Country infrastructure. So you can get some really cheap stuff in some of these African countries if they can actually make it. But, their infrastructure, their roads and airports and harbors are next to non-existent in a lot of these countries. So maybe you can get it made, you just can't get it out. 3 important elements of a country's infrastructure. Technology. Is the speed of their technology increasing, allowing the countries upgrade their technology? So China's really upgrading their technology. Transportation. What's the road network look like? Frequency and availability of the transportation must be considered. And then utilities, light, water, power. So why are these important? Because you got to have them to run factories. Utility service may be frequently interrupted in developing countries. They get brownouts and blackouts. Evaluate how this may affect your production requirements. And then country-specific regulations, customs, import, export, tariffs, trade agreements, all that good kind of stuff. Country-specific accounting standards. So there's no currently accepted global accounting standard. There is an IASB, and they're trying to push their accounting standards. But financial statements in Asia and Africa are oftentimes fiction. Human resource management, recruit the best people for the job and train the workers. So labor skills, what skills are necessary, labor practices, they have standard work hours or legal age, minimum wage, that kind of stuff. Human rights, discrimination. So we're in China a lot. Their human rights record is abysmal. Cultural differences, standard work week, holidays, how much vacation, etc. Europe, everybody's on vacation from like mid-July to mid-August. And the preferred method of communication, if you can communicate at all. Corporate governance issues. So there's 4 major types, according to ISM, around the world. There's market-based. This is North America, Australia, United Kingdom. If they have efficient equity markets, diverse ownership. There's family-based. Management and ownership are combined. This is a lot of the Asian countries, and interestingly enough, France. There's bank-based, government influence in banking, family control usually. Germany, interestingly enough, and South Korea, which sounds about right. And then there's government affiliated, state ownership. No minority influence. This is China and Russia. That's government affiliated. There's bank-based, family-based, and market-based. Those are your 4 types. Legal implications. So no enforceable body of international law. We rely on treaties and agreements to influence business operations. This is why if we're sourcing a supplier in China, legal will often say, if they don't have any assets in the United States or North America, then you can't source from them. Because even if we win the lawsuit in North America, we can't go to China and seize their assets. The Chinese government's not going to let us do that. So each contract needs to state which country's laws will govern it, or what is called the jurisdiction of dispute. This becomes a real big issue between like China and the US. It can also be a big issue between Europe and North America. Intellectual property, many developing countries offer no protection. So check their reputation. Government stability and instability. So yes, you can get some really cheap stuff in Africa, but the government stability over there is not very good at all. So unstable government may be associated with frequent changes in laws and regulations. They nationalize industries, do all kinds of crazy things. Customs brokers. So they act as intermediaries to bring goods into a country for a client. They're licensed by the government. We use customs brokers to bring stuff across the border. Useful if you're unfamiliar with laws, customs, and business practices. The customs brokers are basically the experts on how to get stuff across the border. Financial issues. So there's landed cost, which is acquisition cost, has these things in it, duties, tariffs. It's basically getting the parts to our door. And then there's exchange rates. They fluctuate and are very unpredictable. So they're related to following items, the reason they fluctuate is based on inflation rates, differences between the countries, commercial policies for the governments, international movements of capital, income, and interest rates. So all of those will influence the value of a currency. In America, seeing how everybody loves our currency, we are the currency of choice for most countries. I haven't really seen a lot of questions on these exchange rates, but most of the time what's quoted is the nominal exchange rate. It's the official rate. And the real exchange rate is corrected for purchasing power and inflation. I don't see that quoted. And then the informal parallel market exchange rate, the black market rate. So this is, you'll see this in China and a few other countries that have fixed currencies. So if you're a smaller or medium-sized firm, you got payment mechanisms such as letters of credits, bill of exchange, or draft. And then you can trade with affiliates. And then you'll see.
Rick.
Yeah.
So you've never seen a question on the exchange rates?
No.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, it's kind of
it's
weird.
right, and it's got to vary company by company, right? Everybody has their own,
Well,
feelings
yeah, I
when they
mean,
go internationally.
yeah, and you'll see, you'll see these rates in the paper, and this is posted a lot, and everybody pretty much uses the nominal rate. People
Okay.
don't really try and deal with correcting for inflation in the two countries. It's kind of hard to do. And
Yeah.
then black market exchange rate, you got to kind of go to a black market to find out what that is.
And get fired. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
So the other thing you'll see is ad valorem taxes, and this is on customs a lot. And ad valorem stands for according to value. It's based on a monetary value of the item or the invoice. That's why you always have to have an invoice when these things are coming into the country, because in Europe, especially, they have a lot of
Yeah.
ad valorem
Those
taxes.
are big in Europe.
Yeah. And then the VAT, that's also in Europe, the value added tax. And the VAT is added in Europe to a product at each stage of its production. So it's not cumulative, but the values change as it's, produced, and they get taxed at each level. Most countries use invoice or credit as the basis, and the seller is responsible for collecting the tax. Then you've got tariffs, which have been in the news quite a bit. Export duties and import duties are tariffs. And then they've got 3 different types of tariffs. Specific rate. So this is President Trump was setting a lot of these. Ad valorem, which we just talked about on the value. And then a compound, which is a combination of the two. Then duty drawbacks. So we deal with these a lot. So it's a refund of duties on goods that an importer receives when the importer re-exports the goods. So if I buy something from France and then I send it to Mexico, I can get a duty drawback because I haven't kept that good in the United States, but I paid duty on it when it came into the United States. So if I know what that duty was, I can do a duty drawback and collect that back from the government. You need to match the import with the export documents, which is the trouble, because the import document will say it's tires. The import document will come from Michelin in France. And then I have to match it with my export document going into Mexicali. Then I can get a duty drawback. We'll cover low-cost country sourcing later, and onshoring and reshoring. Language barriers. This can be particularly difficult if the organization must interact. So it's really hard on our engineering group if we're dealing with a Chinese firm that doesn't speak English. It's pretty tough. I mean, you can use translators, but if you got to have day-to-day communication, it's really hard. Culture. Some of the understandings that govern human interaction in a society. It's like, all right, got to define culture. That's as good as any, I suppose. So cultures may differ in 2 broad ways: the values, the way people think, and the behavior, the way they act. And the 2 aren't always in lockstep together. So understanding cultural norms. So the world according to Gert, this is a website. It's got this kind of thing. He covers these areas, and he's got these maps that will tell you, the more towards the lighter red is feminine countries, and the darker red is masculine countries. And he defines masculinity to the extent to which the use of force is endorsed socially. So you see China is really dark red, Central America, a lot of dark red countries in there. Interestingly enough, there's some darker red countries in Europe there. But so Russia, more of a feminine type country. I don't know where he gets that from, but anyway, that website, it's got a bunch of that stuff if you're interested. All right. Which of the following is traditionally the most common form of payment for international business-to-business transactions? Think small to medium-sized firm.
Say net 30.
Yeah, not via check. Yeah, not because
Oh, not
we're
via check though. Yeah.
so they're talking about a check just sending it to Japan. Check would
no.
be dollars.
A wire.
Wire could be, but you're still wiring dollars. And if it's a smaller company, they may lose or win on the translation. I'm thinking what they're going to talk about is letter of credit, because you can coordinate with the bank to pay them in their currency.
Is that still what ISM says? Because I haven't worked with letters of credit in like 15 years.
And you won't
Dealing with overseas. So I understood that letters of credit are just really have gone by the wayside in favor of wire transfers.
They probably
wire
have.
transfers.
Yeah, they probably have, but I'm pretty sure ISM's still stuck on letters of credit. Because the smaller firms will still use them. A firm like Packard is going to use wire transfers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And let's see what they say. Yeah. And what they say about wire transfers. Incorrect, because typically supply management organization would not make prepayment a common practice due to the cash flow.
Well, it said prepayment.
Oh, prepayment. Okay.
You wouldn't prepay.
Yeah, you wouldn't prepay. So that's
pay after. Yeah.
And they'll set those hooks in there every once in a while. You got to read the whole statement, right? So if they just said wire transfer, that would be a much more correct answer, but they didn't. All right. So one other thing here. This is a case study you can do if you like extra credit. It's kind of a big, long word problem. And the answers are located in this answer here. So if I get out of here and go back to the Word doc, down below, this is what you see when you click on the link, and then down below, it'll give you the answer. All right, so I got double booked, and I got to go. My boss wants to talk to all of us. So in the chat are the questions for 1A3. They're the same questions that were up there yesterday. So you guys go ahead and pull down the questions. They are right here. Do 8 through 14, and the answers are located here. And I'm going to go run and do what I got to do. So talk to you guys on Monday. Have a good weekend.
You too. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah.